Security cameras will help catch criminals. What is digital profiling?
This could be a database of people who owe money to a bank from loans they took out, or people who haven't been paying child support.
Transport of the 21st century, which kind is more popular, electric buses or flying taxis?
Modern public transport, it's simply amazing.
Virtual reality mode, Moscow's on the very threshold of a 5G mobile network.
1 megabit per second was considered to be the peak of pleasure, but now MGTS provides speeds of even 500 megabits per second, right on up to a gigabit.
Moscow's rapidly developing high-tech for the future. Science does not stay still for no one. Now, what are intelligent systems and what is a smart city? Let's find out. Moscow is a city full of possibilities, but it wasn't built in a day. Looking back to a half-century ago, Moscow citizens hadn't even heard about all these trendy smart systems such as Wi-Fi, QR codes, GPRS or 5G. There were no super buses on the roads.
Buses were introduced in the 1920s. At first, there weren't so many of them, and so for many years they represented official, sometimes special types of transportation, where people would get in and sit down on benches in the back. Such a bus could seat up to 15 people. Occasionally, people even said that if they were on a route, the bus wouldn't stop at a bus stop, but rather would just slow down a little, and people had to jump out from the back while others would climb inside, and then the bus simply picked up speed again and continued on its way.
But such kinds of transportation were unsafe and uncomfortable, and that's why they were eventually converted into the first domestic buses.
That bus is called the ZIS-8, and it was put into production in Moscow in the mid-1930s. At that time, we already had trucks that were called the ZIS-5, the famous 3-ton Zakhars. The cargo platform was simply taken off from behind and replaced with a bus cabin instead. The driver had to open the front door using a shiny lever in his cabin, while the rear door had no mechanism, and the conductor was responsible for it.
In total, more than 400 of these buses once travelled along the roads of Moscow. But during the Great Patriotic War, almost all of them died on the road of life while carrying soldiers. As a result, only 2 of these buses have survived up until today.
There is one in the collection of Mosfilm, which was included in the film The Meeting Place Cannot Be Changed, and our city colour at that time was that of our transportation. Very promising for those times were the ZIS 154 buses, which in today's terms might even be referred to as a hybrid. They were being manufactured in 1947 at a factory in Moscow named after Stalin.
But that model didn't exactly impress the citizens of Moscow. First, the diesel engine puffed heavily, which irritated passengers, and secondly, the production of such a motor was unreasonably expensive. So in the early 1950s, Moscow switched over to buses with a simpler gasoline engine.
On the outside, these buses are even slightly similar. But this was just a gasoline engine, and again they returned to the same jerking, which was mildly uncomfortable, both when starting from a stop and when braking. And it pushed back for 20 years more, let us say, until a bus with an automatic transmission was invented.
In the 1960s, Moscow began to expand. Remote areas gradually became part of the capital, and people moved from barracks over to new 5-story buildings to the famous Khrushchev-era apartments.
So it was decided to manufacture about 60 such bus trailers. They were hitched to the ZIL 158 buses, which were popular at that time. That type of bus could transport about 110 people.
But the citizens of Moscow didn't like it either.
In cold weather, the trailer would bump up against the curb, and braking was a little bit dangerous as well. So passengers were not enthusiastic about it at all, and many complained.
The domestic auto industry didn't waste time in vain, and during the late 1960s it launched the Laya 607 buses for the citizens of Moscow.
Its doors were very broad, and when these doors opened up, they hid their dirty sides in each other. And this is when the famous automatic transmission arrived, with a comparatively soft and quiet sound.
In fact, in the 1960s, all necessary and most advanced types of public transport at that time were circulating around Moscow: subways, trams, trolleybuses and buses. During the 1980s, traffic on the city's streets became much more intense. It seemed that the limit had been reached, but today this level is even 6 times higher. The transport infrastructure of the city is constantly progressing and happening so quickly that soon we'll be able to see those new driverless cars on the streets of Moscow.
Modern public transport, it's simply amazing.
Smart cities developing really quickly in Moscow, and it actually all began a few years ago in the public transportation system. Muscovites don't need to buy expensive cars anymore because there's other technological options available. Personal cars in Moscow are becoming a thing of the past. At present, public transportation such as buses, trams and trolleybuses, taxis are at the peak of popularity. We're on the territory of the Skolkovo Innovation Center at a station for monitoring driverless vehicles. There's an example of a driverless taxi right in front of me. Let's see what it can do. It's the first driverless taxi in Europe which independently passes other vehicles, drives around obstacles and stops at the right place. It can do all this thanks to cameras and sensors installed on the roof as well as digital equipment in the trunk. We can be especially proud of the fact that all the car's software has been developed by Russian software engineers. Moscow, of course, is an example to follow for the rest of the country. Here, artificial intelligence has come to play a decisive role in almost all areas of the life of its citizens.
Numerous rating agencies have placed Moscow on the list of leaders in the implementation of information technologies, in education, healthcare, and the housing and utility sectors. These unique systems include the following: the Unified Medical System of Electronic Management of Medical Institutions, the Moscow Online School, our unique traffic control system, and the Intelligent Transport System.
And today's smart technologies have been introduced into public transport. The system of driverless vehicles has 18 categories of various risks, and it responds only to 1/3 of them, the most significant ones. For example, a car can clearly see an obstacle in the form of a person on the road, and so it stops automatically a few meters away. So far, these driverless taxis have been driving only around the territory of the Skolkovo Innovation Center, but in the near future, the citizens of Moscow will be able to try out this know-how for themselves on the very streets of the city. Great cars. I wonder when they're going to appear on the streets of Moscow. We're going to be talking about that with the Vice President and City Manager of Skolkovo, Maxim Sheflin. Maxim Nikolaevich Shefel, I've just seen your amazing driverless taxi. Tell me please, when it's going to appear on the streets of Moscow?
We believe that this will happen next year, because Yandex is ready for it. In addition, by a decree of the government, which Dmitry Anatolyevich signed this year, Moscow and the Republic of Tatarstan are regions where these vehicles can be tested on public roads. So, I think that Yandex Taxi will not be just in Moscow, but also in Kazan.
And tell me please, how did the idea appear for such a service in Moscow? And the experience of which countries has inspired you?
I think that it was the combined experience from all the advanced countries, because all of them are striving to have driverless vehicles. I cannot say for sure what kind of experience the company Yandex has relied on, but it is clear that they chose something good, because they have been quite successful in piloting their vehicles.
Innovation development is said to be the best way to attract investments. Is that really true?
We have a shining example of Silicon Valley, and Skolkovo has been quite successful in this regard. That means that people who want to invest in some venture capital companies, that is, through venture funds or directly in some innovative companies, they come and they buy new technologies.
And could you say why the citizens of Moscow need such a service? Will it be cheaper or faster?
To be cheaper and faster is probably not the cornerstone of this. I would instead think about security issues here. A computer-controlled driverless vehicle is more secure than a human-controlled vehicle, as it won't drive into oncoming lanes because that's technically impossible. and it won't exceed the speed limit because it does not need to hurry anywhere. It is made of steel. So, things such as this, they give us hope that these vehicles will be significantly safer. But regardless, we'll check and see how it will be in reality on the streets. This is the main idea for which this technology has been actively developed. We are talking about transmitters, LiDARs and special sensors. There is a significant amount of high-tech equipment which is being mounted on conventional vehicles of current design.
They say that you're planning to provide the citizens of Moscow not only with driverless vehicles, but with air taxis as well. Is this true?
Yes, this is the next evolutionary stage of development, when we have air taxis. At the moment, we, as the Skolkovo Innovation Center, are seriously thinking about the infrastructure for these air taxis. Now, we are not planning to somehow relate to the vehicles themselves, but more to some of their details. But we are serious about the infrastructure itself, because we are creating a new, innovative city, and it must meet all the challenges that arise. For example, we were one of the first to create a track for unmanned vehicles for beta testing pilotless aerial vehicles. Accordingly, we are going to create parking lots for these air taxis. For our part, we will consider the issue of land allocation to an investor for organization of these parking lots for air taxis. When such an investor comes, he will be able to create the infrastructure for these air vehicles. As well, we will consider the issue of approval of the corridors where these air vehicles will be flying around. And we will try to create it in such a way that it can be shared around the country and around the world. That is, we are focused on the supporting infrastructure for air taxis.
In general, is the city ready for the launch of air taxis? What technological solutions are needed to bring about this program?
It is definitely crucial to create the necessary infrastructure. We're not ready at this point. Neither is Skolkovo. We need the infrastructure. We need zones, security zones, we need corridors, and we need certified vehicles. None of this is available right now. We are at the very beginning of the path. We will somehow try to accomplish this work.
Maxim Nikolaevich, thank you very much for talking to us today. But as you say, it's better to see once than to hear 100 times. Well then, let's fly. This is a prototype of the city's electro-flying vehicle, or to put it simply, the first version of a future Moscow air taxi, which will avoid traffic jams and reduce both the level of pollution in the city as well as travel time. By the way, in the future, a new type of vehicle will look like this. This is the current model of a flying machine being flown in Dubai. It's kept in the air with the help of propellers around the sides that run on electric motors. In Russia, the stakes remain high on flying cars. Moscow developers assure us that their version will be better than other such flying cars around the world.
Well, just an ordinary telephone, you're not going to surprise anybody with one of these things anymore. But it's got an incredible range of possibilities. You can buy things online, you can buy for tickets to fly to Hawaii, whatever you want. You can go into banks virtually. And of course, you can just use it to speak on the phone to somebody. Hello, Olga.
A cell phone, a gadget without which it's difficult to imagine your life today. It has all the information you need, bank cards, your usual activities, the places you go, and your personal life data. In fact, this mini computer which we constantly carry around with us has become a key part of today's smart city.
Smart city is an opportunity to create a comfortable environment for citizens, figuratively speaking, and to reduce the distance between a person and an official.
The first necessary condition is high-speed internet, which is now in every home, in public transport and even in the Moscow subway, and will soon be on the streets of Moscow.
Today, the city is filled with data transmission channels. The question here is not simply about the availability of fiber optics, but also in those technologies that are being used, roughly speaking, at the end. If we talk about access to the internet using technical language, 1 megabit per second was once considered to be the peak of pleasure, yet now MGTS provides speeds of even 500 megabits per second, right on up to a gigabit.
In other words, in order to watch a new film, you will only need to go to a special portal and press the play button. By the way, a phone can help out in many other usual situations in everyday life. While lawyers are discussing the introduction of such applications for private smartphones, an intelligent video surveillance system is protecting Moscow from criminals and gangsters. Over 150,000 smart security cameras are helping to maintain order around the city.
We scan the video stream, we capture people's faces from this video stream, and compare each face with the information contained in our database. For example, this could be a database of people who owe money to a bank from loans they took out, or are not paying child support, or are on the federal wanted list. And then, if and when we get a match, a notification about this is sent to the phone of some responsible employee, and then he or she can decide what to do with this person.
The video cameras of the Centre of Traffic Organisation operate on the same principle. They are called park-ons and are built into the car itself. Their task is to record parking and stopping violations, as well as to record unpaid parking. The images captured are clear, even at a speed of 60 kilometers an hour. 2 cameras work simultaneously in the system. One shoots a picture of the general view, while the other captures the license plate of the car. There is also illumination for night patrol. The car drives through the same area twice in order to catch a violator in the act. It'll be difficult to hide from justice thanks also to a Bluetooth wireless personal network. Today it's being used not just for data transfer between phones, it also guards courtyards to keep out unapproved cars and lets inside only those who have a special key. And it can block the passage through a ticket barrier in the subway, as the organisers of the World Cup did in Moscow.
Special ticket barriers were installed in subway stations, which allowed entrance through the barriers and free use of the services of the Moscow subway during match days. This technology used fan ID features issued to each of the fans.
Smart technologies have come to play an active role in almost all spheres of life in Moscow. Digitalization specialists call this an ecosystem, and the citizens of Moscow refer to it simply as a kind of comfort, which will soon become even more accessible.
Your face is the main factor because it is a way that you can confirm your identity. That is, now it's even established at the level of federal law that you can receive a remote banking service without having to leave your house. There is another interesting scenario in retail, where you can choose a method of payment from your purchase by using your face.
Moscow has taken leading positions in the overall ranking of countries in terms of quality of virtual services provided for citizens, second only to Singapore, London, Shanghai, New York. Experts say that in a few years, the people of Moscow will need to leave their homes only in case of an emergency or to meet friends. Everything else will be available via the use of smart technologies. Edward Anatolovich, thank you very much for finding time to meet with us today. I know you have an incredibly busy schedule. Now, today we're living in an era where almost everything around us is already automated. Can you tell me, please, now, just how deeply has these new technologies, smart technologies, entered into the lives of Muscovites? And what areas have these technologies affected already?
Well, you know, in our opinion, they have not entered deeply enough, but they are already present well enough in every area that surrounds a person in Moscow. We think that the first thing the government needs to do is to provide electronic services. That is, there are about 260 electronic services available for people to access through a single website, the mayor's web portal. And the number of applications to this web portal amounts to approximately 750,000 every day. And the total number of services rendered in November during 9 months came to about 8 million. That is a lot. This is such a big point of presence, a true electronic dominance. You know, people need to go and solve their problems, and this is very important for us. This eliminates barriers, saves time, and this is a real leap in understanding, which is highly important for people. Another important area is education. It is actually the thing that makes us who we are as people, grew up from childhood, and it forces parents to dive into the system of all possible services in the world, and also in the city, of course. Accordingly, our main aspect is a digitalization of the educational process. This is a highly developed infrastructure. It is called Moscow Online School. It covers at present 1.5 buildings and is a high school teaching the 5th to 11th grades. And there we have special interactive panels, a special Wi-Fi zone and electronic content.
Isn't it a replacement for a teacher, or is it just kind of a help for a teacher?
Of course, this can by no means replace real dialogue, but given the fact that we all live in the world of technological progress, we certainly provide new technical opportunities for teaching.
So the most important ones are transport, education, and...
And medicine as well. Of course, medicine is also very important, and we all have to deal with it from time to time. We all want to do so less often, but nevertheless, at present there are 600 medical institutions which provide free public medical care, fully covered. This segment is entirely covered by the relevant infrastructure. That is, we have unified record services and an absolutely transparent record queue. The mayor can monitor this all online, and he can see the length of a queue up to the last office in the form of little green and red men. Of course, the mayor does not personally track this right now. It is monitored by a special control system, the situational center, but it simply reflects how free, clear and easy everything has become. We already have 7.5 million electronic medical records in the system, fully electronic, and there is a constant circulation of medical documents within it.
So it turns out that this smart technology allows people to manage the resources that they now have more effectively, right? Now, in what way do these new technologies make people's lives more comfortable? And how do they help Moscow citizens?
For the city, this is certainly a matter of economy and logistics in the first place. That is, when, for example, a new medical polyclinic is being designed, they take into account all the data accumulated and stored in electronic form over several years. We can see where people live, how they move around during the day, and how their children go to school. Not in the sense of every individual, but in the sense of the masses. And this big data allows us to design a new point of presence. For example, an outpatient clinic can be designed with the understanding of what kinds of people live around that area and where they are studying. It's pretty clear then how they will go to this medical facility.
5G is the next step. When will it be launched? Is it dangerous? I've heard some rumors that birds are dying and other terrible things. And what is it actually like in reality?
5G pilot zones are already working in Moscow, and they were available during the World Cup. But no animals were hurt and people were happy.
Many people say that with the arrival of artificial intelligence, lots of jobs are and will disappear. What is it like in reality?
You know, speaking about artificial intelligence, despite the fact that for many years there have been languages that teach themselves and can win chess matches, a person has other things to deal with, and this is more than about creativity and more about issues related to inventing something based on what computers can provide us with. That is, well, I think that it will be the case. As for production, the general trend of production is micro-production with regard to 3D printing and so on, and it also goes in the same direction. That is, this kind of intelligence, including production facilities, will help people to express themselves better. Actually, young people as they are growing up, they are not so fixated on the difficulties of their past. They think in terms of services, they think in terms of information, and they think in terms of problem solving. With this in mind, and for this purpose, artificial intelligence is being designed, to provide it as needed. What's the most important thing here? Well, we should not forget who the designer is, so that these designers are truly bright, with a bright mind and a healthy heart, and that they have worked for a good cause.
Thank you so much for your time. I wish you good luck in your work. Goodbye.
So now we know what a smart city is. Pretty cool, isn't it? But we should never forget that technology, doesn't matter how smart it is, can replace live communication in the city of Moscow. My name's John Harrison. See you next time.